My moment was when I lost my dad in 2012, and he had made the decision to donate his body to Wayne State Medical School. And at the end of the academic year, when the students were done with their gross anatomy course, there was a service for all of the families of everybody who had donated their bodies. And so I had the chance to meet one of the medical students who had worked with my dad's body. And it was a profoundly intimate conversation that happened only with our hands and our eyes as we looked at each other and cried and held each other, and like we both got the significance of that moment. It was really helpful in my healing journey.
I am Dr. Larry Burchett, and as I see every day in the ER, life can change in a moment. Here on this show, we tell the stories that matter most, after which we are never the same. Talk about a story that matters most. I'm so excited to have Dr. Alexandra Solomon here on the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you.
Oh, this is so exciting. This is a thrill for me. Let me show them your books. We got 2 books. This is the one you're promoting now, Taking Sexy Back. This purple guy, this book changed my life.
It means so much to hear that.
It changed my life. I'm sure that's like fun when you're doing this, that to hear it actually helps people.
It is delightful. It is like, I don't think that I set out, I couldn't have known when I set out to write a book that was going to be my favorite part, is just like that loop of when something lands well and something serves. It's just so beautiful. I mean, you know, as a physician, like it just feels so good to be of service. I just love it.
That's why we do what we do. Are we okay over there? You're adjusting the camera.
No, you're good.
I want to talk about why I reached out and connected to you and why this book was so important. So I went through some heartbreak a little less than a year. I was crushed. Oh, I was so crushed. I was in a relationship that meant a lot to me, and when it ended, that was pretty painful. And the story that I was telling myself at the time was, I screwed it up. Maybe if I was a stronger man, or I knew how to play the game, or if I could have done this or that things would have ended up differently. And not only was I going through the loss and the triggers of all this other stuff, not only did I feel bad, but then I was blaming myself. I just felt terrible. I felt terrible, and I thought it was my fault. And then I found your book, and I don't know who got me this thing. And I'm going to say what I took from this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Loving Bravely, you talk a lot about what you call relational awareness, relational self-awareness. And the basic idea that really helped me was that when you start to become truly intimate with somebody, when 2 people kind of start to get close, what happens every time is that your stuff comes up. Your insecurities, your past, your traumas, your triggers, all of this stuff comes up. And that's part of the deal. It's normal. It's actually probably a sign that something real was happening. And the way that you deal with it is you get through it. So you're aware of your own stuff as it comes up. It's yours. You deal with it. You communicate it. I'm feeling this. You learn how to get through it in that crucible. It's like the relationship is the crucible, while holding space for your partner, the other person, to do the same thing. Hearing that, for me, was really healing in a way that helped me to let go and move on and not feel like I was so broken for like a failure.
Yeah, it helped. What I'm hearing you say is that it helped you move. The story you wanted to attach to the breakup was, I screwed it up. It was a shame-loaded story. You wanted.
I don't know that I wanted to. That's like what automatically I did. Yeah.
It's just what happened. And so this gave you a possibility to understand that it was a dance. It was 2 stories that came together in this way, and that you can't carry all the responsibility. No, it's too thin a story, right? It's too thin a story that one person is responsible for everything that happens in a relationship. But where in your life would you have learned that, right? Our culture is obsessed with romance and falling in love, but we are not obsessed with giving people the actual tools and paradigms and ways of understanding relationship that really are helpful and do justice to how complicated, how stirring romantic love is?
Stirring.
Stirring the pot. Whatever
Stirring.
you think you
Stirring.
have figured
Stirring.
out. So much
I'm gonna
stirring.
stir.
Right.
I did a little more than stir.
Oh.
I've given your book, I don't know how many times I've given this thing as a gift to people. I'm like, oh, you need this book. Check this thing out. So I have no hesitation in recommending this to people. I think it's one of the best relationship books I've ever read. And so I'm thrilled that you're here. This is so fun for me to have you on the show. Thank you very much for being here.
It's nice to be here. It's fun to kind of have it be the order of things, that you know the book and then now we know each other. It's really lovely.
It's
very
so
lovely for me.
I want to get to your new book right now, Taking Sexy Back. A lot to talk about in there. But the show is called Life Can Change in a Moment. And I'm really curious what moment you're going to talk about.
I really have tried to not talk about this moment. I'm trying to pull up something that's a bit more convenient than this moment, but this moment won't leave me alone. So I'm just going to tell you the story of this moment.
This sounds really good already.
Oh boy, well, I don't want to set the bar too high here.
I'm ready for your maybe average moment.
Okay, bye.
No expectations.
That's right. So I lost my dad September 2012. And he made the decision before he passed away to give his body to science. So he donated his body to Wayne State University's medical school. And I was like, oh, no. These students are not going to work with my dad's body without knowing my dad's story. So I wrote like a 6-page letter to the medical students of, the class of whatever it was, telling the story. My dad, first of all, has a complicated medical history. He was a transplant recipient, so they would open him and find 3 kidneys and 2 pancreases. I don't know what the word.
Pancreas.
Pancreas.
No, I have no idea.
So I wanted them to hear I wanted them to have the medical story and understand that. But I more so wanted them to know the man that he was, right?
Yeah.
So I wrote this letter, and my intention was that it would just go to that group of students that was working with him. Well, the medical school decided to read the letter to the entire class. It's very beautiful.
Oh, wow.
So then in the spring, they do a service for all of the, where they do sort of a collective ceremony for all of the cadavers that year, and they invite all the medical students and then any families who want to go. And so I, of course, wanted to be there, and because I now was very comfortable being a pain in this medical school's ass, I was like, may I also meet the medical students that worked with my dad's body?
Oh, my God.
And I ended up only connecting with one, but she and I, it was like one of those moments I will never forget. I can feel the chills. We just met each other and we just held hands and cried. Oh, wow. And we didn't even say anything to each other. It was just she got it and I got it. She knew my dad in a way that I never would know him, right? She knew his body in a way that nobody else would. And we just held hands, locked eyes, hugged each other. And then we finally got a little bit of composure. She said, I want you to know that my plan was to become a pediatrician. That was my plan my whole life. But after the experience of working with your dad's body in the way I did, I now want to be a surgeon. It changed my whole life.
Oh, wow.
And I could hear my dad's laughter. He would love that this beautiful young woman, that he had just thrown her whole life into a tailspin, right? That he had just, it was just magnificent. And it was a moment of just the way it stays with me is it was a really important part of my grief, right? It was like a sort of a closing of a loop of my grief. And it added a dimension around my notions of death and grief and loss, and the magnificence of just not knowing how lives intersect and worlds meet each other, and a kind of bowing before the mystery of the whole thing. It was
wow. So your moment was meeting the medical student who God, I even feel uncomfortable saying, used your father's
took
body.
his body just
in gross anatomy and dissected him and used his body to learn, all of the anatomy.
Yeah.
You remember what was her name? Her first name?
I have no idea.
And you met her. this was, I think, Gross Anatomy is first year, maybe?
Yeah, right.
So she would have, finished her first year. Mm-hmm. And did you guys talk? You said it was just...
We talked about, she shared with me that she was now, going to become a surgeon instead of a pediatrician. And I think that was it. Then I sat for the ceremony, and the ceremony was really beautiful, really sacred. And then we have not kept in touch. It was just, it was a moment of deep, deep, deep intimacy.
Yeah.
But it didn't last. It wasn't like
fleeting.
Yeah. But no less significant because of its fleeting nature.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. At the time that you met her, had your dad been gone a year, or how long was it?
Yeah, it might have even been close to 2 years, because when he yes, just about a year. So it would have been in the spring.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I ask about your dad? Tell me about your dad.
He was a guy who would not have had much patience for the work that I do. He didn't...
Being a therapist, a couples therapist,
yeah,
you mean?
Yeah, but he didn't... he was a man, I think, who felt deeply, and a deeply intuitive man, and a deeply kind man, but not a guy who would enjoy the mucking around and feelings. He would not pick up a self-help book. He wouldn't, have a podcast. It wouldn't have been his world. But,
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good. But he was a deeply good man. In fact, when he passed, I had the just really strange opportunity. So I have two brothers, both of whom are younger than I am, both of whom are very identified with their masculinity. They're kind of, guys. One's a police officer, the other drives fast cars. They're just sort of these very traditionally masculine men.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I caught bits of conversations where each of them were asked separately, what will you miss most about your dad? And they both gave the exact same answer, which was the thing they loved most about our dad was that when they would walk into the room, his face would light up. So what they loved was how his face looked when he saw each of them. It's a beautiful reminder of, as a parent, I think we often think that what we are supposed to be doing is making opportunities for our kids and getting them on the right path and teaching them about life. Discipline and lessons, really important lessons. And that really, at the end of the day, what our kids care about most is how our faces look when we see them.
Yeah. You're happy to see them, you love them.
And just oh my God, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here.
How did he have 2 pancreases and 3 kidneys?
Can
I ask his medical history?
Yeah. So he had juvenile, what do we call it? It's like type 1 diabetes, insulin dependent type 1 when he was 16. And so then by the time he was in his 40s, his kidneys were failing.
Okay.
And
so he had kidney failure from diabetes, from type 1 diabetes.
Yep.
Okay.
And this was in the early 90s. So he ended up being University of Wisconsin. We lived in Detroit, but University of Wisconsin was just starting to do, this was like 1991, they were just starting to transplant not just a kidney, which then the diabetes is going to destroy again over time.
Oh, so he got
but transplanting the pancreas as well.
Okay.
So that was his recipient. He had both organs transplanted at once.
Okay.
And then he was not insulin dependent then for the rest of his life.
How old was he when he got that transplant?
40.
Do you remember this?
Mid-40s. Oh yeah, I was a senior in high school. I drove he and my stepmom to the airport because when you're an organ transplant recipient, you get the call and you go. So there were organs available. I drove them. I'll never forget the drive to the airport in a Detroit snowstorm.
Yeah.
They got on the airplane, flew to Wisconsin, and had the surgery. And he went through a round of rejection. So they had to do the organ rejection, and then he was well, and
But he kept the same organs, and they just kind of medicated
got him through
it. Yeah.
I mean, it was an amazing life. So that transplant really bought him over 2 more decades of life. Right? He would have
20-something years.
Oh yeah, I mean he lived to almost 70, which was
Okay.
still too young. None of us were ready to.
So you said he got transplanted at 40-something, and he was 70?
Yep, 68 when he passed.
Okay. Let me say just a little thing about diabetes. So type 1 diabetes, you might be wondering, why did he get a pancreas and a kidney? So type 1 diabetes, your blood sugar goes up because you don't make any insulin. That's not the diabetes that most people have in America, which is you make a ton of insulin, but it's not working because of obesity, diet, exercise, and so forth. So if you transplanted a pancreas and a kidney into somebody with type 2 diabetes, wouldn't fix the problem. But it's curative for someone whose pancreas just didn't make any insulin. And so that's really, that's fascinating. So not only did he, over time, unfortunately, diabetes destroyed his kidney, so he gets a new kidney,
Right.
but then also gets a cure to his diabetes.
Yep.
Just a little medical.
You want to hear another interesting twist?
Keep going.
A year later, so his organ transplant, his organs came from a young guy, a 20-something guy who died in a motorcycle accident. And then a year after my dad got his transplant, he was diagnosed with stage 4 testicular cancer, which is atypical in a 40-something.
Stage 4? Wow.
Atypical in a 40-something-year-old man, very common in a 20-something-year-old man. So there was...
Oh, so do they think he got it? This was after the transplant?
a year after the transplant.
So they think he got it, those cancer cells. I mean, you could tell. You could look at you could look at the DNA of those cancer cells and see, are they his DNA or are they
Right.
actually from the donor? But that's what they thought, huh? It might be from the donor.
And I don't think anybody ever pursued it, because it was basically then, it's like treating cancer on an organ recipient is very complicated, right?
It's
Because
so
you need
complicated.
the immune system low, so your body doesn't reject the organs, but you need the immune system high because you've got chemo and that's compromised. So it just was, we had to go back to University of Wisconsin to have the treatment there because it was really, really complicated. But of course he came through that as well because he was my dad. He was just at death's door so many times and all right, what are we doing now?
So not only did he survive kidney failure, cured his diabetes, but then he got stage 4 testicular cancer, survived that, and went on to live 20-ish years later.
Yep, walked me down the aisle.
Well, I was just going to say, so in those 20 years, that time that you got, that this donation gave you guys, what are some of your fondest memories with him in that time?
Yeah, my wedding certainly. So I was raised Christian, but I fell in love with the first Jewish boy I ever met, and then converted to Judaism, and so at our wedding,
You converted before you got married.
I did. I converted a year before we got married, and so we had a Jewish wedding. And my dad walked me down the aisle, and he insisted on wearing a kippah, even though he was a Christian man. He's like, I am absolutely wearing a kippah. Give me one of those kippahs, and was very just very sweet and supportive. So that's a really fond memory. Was my dad, our wedding day, and the fact that my children, who are now 17 and 15, they both remember him and have fond memories of him. That's a huge blessing as well.
Mazel tov. So was he always wanted to donate his body to science? Did these experiences, you think, kind of made him want to do that when he passed?
I think so. I think it was for him a kind of completion, a kind of giving back.
So he gets sick, and how did he eventually pass?
He was, towards the end of his life, on kidney dialysis.
So eventually his donated kidney failed, but he got 15 plus years
Right.
out of it. That's great.
Absolutely.
Right.
Maybe even 20 plus years. And then he eventually passed from a systemic blood infection. He passed
or
quick.
something.
He was in and out of the hospital. And then when he passed very quickly.
Kind of sudden.
Yep.
How was that for you? It doesn't sound like you were you thinking the time may be limited, or?
Yeah, I think for a couple of years, every time I would see him, I would sort of consciously take in our hug and kind of hold an awareness that it might be our last one.
So you had kind of started almost the goodbye process.
I had started the goodbye process. I felt like we had some conversations. I felt like I had said what I wanted to say to him. So there was a sense of completeness. Not that anyone's ever ready. What also was helpful is I was pretty deep into my spiritual practices at that point. So I was in a women's spiritual study group where we would read a book by Deepak Chopra or watch, a talk about spirituality. And so I was pretty deep into that. And so I think that really buoyed me, and losing him was I could still feel him. I think maybe also because he was ill for so long, I think he sort of lived near the veil, as we would say, between life and death. And so he just has been very, very present to me since he's been gone. So in that way, it kind of eases a loss, is to feel like I'm, that there's a nearness there. And so that was helpful.
Talk to me a little bit, and this is where we're talking about your experience, your human experience. I also want to kind of, point out to people and remind them you're a therapist yourself, a couples therapist. And so in talking about grieving and saying goodbye to people, what is important for people to do? So I'm wondering, okay, your dad's on dialysis and you're thinking, gosh, he may not have so much time. At that time, what were you like, this is important for me to say or to do? What was that process like for you?
I think what was important was, I wanted him to know how much I loved him. And I remember when I brought it up to him, he's like, Al, I get it. It just was I didn't need to say the things that I felt like I needed to say, that I wanted to make sure.
He
but
knew.
I think, yeah. And I think that is, grief is such, I love these both ands, right? These things are these
do love the both
contradictory.
I love that you bring that stuff
up.
Oh
my gosh, where so much of life is holding on to these contradictory truths. And so there was, with my dad, there was this contradictory truth of he was suffering and he had so much more life than anybody thought he was going to have, and nobody wanted him to go. All those things were true. And I think with grief especially, it's one of those topics where we can get really either or. We can have a hard time holding on to contradictions. If I feel a sense of relief that this person has passed away, then that means I didn't love them. Absolutely not. There can be lots of both and. I am both relieved and devastated.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the work that I would want people to do as they're anticipating a loss, is just making space for all of the feelings that come up, even if they are contradictory or if they feel like they confront a story we have about how grief should look. Whenever we have a should about an emotional experience, that's a little red flag inside of us saying wait a minute, what is this should doing here? Whose story is it? What belief system does that should come from?
Let me slow you down. I try, whenever I start to get confused, I'm like, there's probably somebody watching who's a little bit confused too. So let me start. You said whenever we have a should about an emotional experience, and then you're walking us through some questions to kind of challenge our assumption or belief about, and it sounds like you're saying, no, if it's an emotional experience, pay attention to the emotion, let the emotion be, don't talk yourself out of it, experience it, whatever.
Yep.
I want you to finish that thought, and then the question that I'm asking is, but then how do we also say, well, this is what's true? Do you see what my question is? So anyway, you were talking about whenever we are saying a should about an emotional experience.
Yeah. That piece right there, just noticing, I'm doing that thing where I have an emotion and then I attach a story about I shouldn't feel that emotion, or I should feel this emotion instead. So just catching that and bracketing it is really, really important, because it happens quickly, right? Very quickly, an emotion is a bodily state. That's all an emotion is.
Something you feel in your body that...
Yep. It's really physiological. It's rooted in the body. But really quickly, because we as humans make meaning out of everything, we really quickly attach a story that we don't even maybe consciously know we've done. So it's, I feel relief.
What does it mean? I feel relief and...
Oh my God, that means I didn't love the person.
Yeah.
I should not feel relief. That's not an appropriate emotion. Only X kind of person would feel an emotion like that at a time like this. And that all comes in before we even know, and it changes the whole experience of
Totally.
relief. Now we're down some road that has to do with shame or whatever.
All I'm thinking about is my own loss of my mother when I was 20-something, and I can identify with, at the end, when she got sick, and over a period of days, we knew she was going to go, and we were waiting. It's like we were up all night long, and so similarly, when she finally went, and she was out of pain, and then, the 24-hour vigil had ended, I felt some relief, along with a whole lot of other much more difficult to experience feelings of loss and grief and so forth. Like I was relieved and really, really incredibly sad and numb and angry and on and on. But
do you remember feeling guilty about the relief, or feeling judging yourself for the relief?
Yes, yeah, there was that too. And exactly what you're saying, where the thought creeps in. It's like, you're relieved she's gone. No. The good son would be willing to fight it all, stay up all night for an unending amount of time to experience every last whatever, or whatever the...
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
So I was kind of I was kind of curious, when did your dad get this idea to be a donor? Do you know? Maybe not a big deal. So... Okay, so he's on dialysis, and you're saying some of the things that you wanted to say, which he already knew. That sounds like an important thing. Is that 30?
Yeah.
That sounds like an important thing for people to do if they have that chance, right?
You know what I think blocks it? I think we make this, I think sometimes what keeps us from speaking what we want to speak to somebody who is dying is it's a fear of, if I say these things about the fact that you are dying, it somehow conveys to you that I think you're going to die, that I want you to die, or somehow like it will make it true. Like I think we act
brings up the uncomfortable truth.
Yeah, we get kind of like this magical thinking of like, if we don't talk about what's happening here, then maybe it won't happen.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes can silence us.
I think it depends on, like, the doctor in me is like, it depends on the person. Where are they at with their own condition? A lot of people are in incredible denial about how little time they have left, and it may be uncomfortable to be the one that's like, hey, I want to say some things. Like the implicit being, I don't think you have much time left, and there's some things I want to say.
That's right, and it confronts that. It confronts the denial system.
Yeah.
And if that's a choice a loved one makes, is to say like, I can't speak truth to this person because they aren't able to reckon with their dying, then you don't speak the truth. And you speak it in prayer after the person passes, right? Or you speak it, you go down to the ocean and speak it to the ocean after the person passes,
you respect that and don't confront them with that.
Yeah, that's there are entire complicated family systems that I would not pretend to say what somebody should do in that moment. But if that's somebody's intuitive sense, is like, my loved one is so deep in their denial about their how serious this is, and I don't feel comfortable rocking that boat, then you don't. Then fine. Then don't. That's not a wrong. But then you don't. Then I wouldn't want them to do is then beat themselves up after the person dies of regretting that they hadn't said it. What I would want them to do is practice self-compassion of like, no. I don't. It's not a regret situation. You didn't speak your truth because you were coming from a place of deep empathy for the fact that your dying loved one was not interested in hearing any of that.
Yeah.
They were not available. Okay.
I agree with you in that probably inappropriate to be confrontational, especially if somebody's in denial near the end.
Right.
Maybe there's a way to sit down and say some things you want to say. Hey, I really love you. Hey, these are some of the things I really liked, whatever. Without putting the end and saying, goodbye, I've loved having you in my life.
Right, because you are about to die, I'm going to say these things to you.
Right,
Doesn't
and just
need to
like,
be.
just kind of connecting with what somebody means to you. The thing that,
Do you want to stop?
let's keep going.
Well, okay. Just to add to this, talking culturally about dealing with death. Did you see the movie The Farewell?
No.
I don't know that movie.
Oh, the Asian
In Asian
movie.
culture, if you're given a terminal diagnosis for something and your family knows about it, they won't tell you.
That's right.
Because they think that the trauma, the shock of finding out that you're dying can contribute to your dying.
Right.
And so they have this whole ritual and circumstance that they kind of work around. So it's like, how do different cultures
Culturally.
Right,
deal
sure.
with death and how they accept it?
Sure.
We can keep going. I wanted to before I forgot.
Yeah. Listening to you talk about what you were saying to your father reminds me of saying goodbye to my own mother. And she died she had kidney cancer, and she had stage 4 kidney cancer. And now I know a lot more about that prognosis than I did before I went to medical school. And I think we were all kind of hoping for more. And then, bam, she like died really quick in a weekend. And I didn't say that goodbye. That's haunted me in a way where, how many times have I written that letter? You know, where there's something there that's had to be grieved. Does everybody have to say some kind of goodbye? God, part of me that's gone through it, and as a doctor, I think the real thing is live your life and express that stuff. Don't wait until the end when somebody's dying. Like, be connected with how you really feel about somebody and expressive of it and that kind of thing. And, I would encourage most people to think about, what do you want to say? Say it. Yeah. Say it while you got it.
What do you think she would say to you if she knew, like, if she knew you were carrying a sense of regretting you didn't say what you wanted to say? What do you think she would want you to?
I don't feel like I'm holding on to that thing now. I think I have expressed that enough, but that was a big, and it was, for me, it was kind of the tip of the iceberg of the grief of saying goodbye to all of the hopes and dreams that I had.
Yeah.
That aren't going to happen.
Of what you guys would get to experience.
Yeah, she's never met my daughter.
Right.
She was a nurse who dreamed of
Oh.
practicing together. That never, all of these
Yes.
things where it's just like,
Yeah.
you're just like,
Yeah. And so I wonder if there's a way that we get hooked onto the regret of what we didn't say, because it's like, it's the illusion that we have some control over any of it, right? It's like a thing that we imagine, we like put it back on ourselves. I wonder if it's a way that at least initially we kind of bind the massiveness of grief. We kind of bind it by putting it all in the...
like the illusion we have some kind of control.
Yeah, and that
over
I
the
should have.
thing.
Like the I should have maybe is easier than just the big nebulous unfolding of like all of the loss of future, you know?
I'm open to that.
I don't know. I was just thinking that as you were saying that about that maybe there's, you know, and whatever we do, what I remember most about grieving those first like days and weeks was how physiological it was. Like I remember feeling like I was walking through pea soup. Like my body felt like it was like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Like it just...
That
was
walking
so
through pea soup
heavy.
means heavy? Oh, like
just
slogging through.
like so weighed down.
What
like,
was that like for you when he passed?
that was like really like the like I remember being like really caught off guard by how physiological it was.
How much you felt it in your body? You felt heavy and slowly moving. And had you lost other people close? Was that your kind of biggest?
I had lost a sibling of mine. I had lost a sibling to suicide when I was in my 20s, and I had lost grandparents. Yeah, so those were my most immediate experiences.
And then I'm just curious about so talk about the things you did beforehand, and then how did you grieve afterwards? I don't mean to pound you too much on
The grief.
grieving, or to go too much into it, but
I think in part the things I did with the medical school were part of how I dealt, like how I grieved was that. I think carrying him with me, like I sort of would put him on my shoulder, like just sort of imagine him there with me. I'd bring him with me. I think also the fact that I was, have been busy with a career and a husband and kids and, sort of just being in my life, which I have a sense would be what he would want me to do. There is a way that like life keeps going, right? I've got kids that have to get to school and I've got clients to see. And so there's a way that I just would kind of like bring him with me. Okay, like this is what we're up to today. And
do you talk to him, and you said you have a sense of his presence? Tell me more about that. What does that mean?
I do. I love, Oprah Winfrey has this thing that she says, when somebody you love passes away, you have an angel that you know by name.
Yeah.
I love that. So I think I often, when I'm like looking for guidance or, I think that's, I don't talk out loud to him.
Yeah.
Not that, but just...
You have a sense that he's kind of with you. We had another guest, Rachel Markarian, who lost her father when she was young, and she talked about how she's a performer, a dancer, and one thought that was really helpful for her in the grieving was somebody said how now he's got the best seat in the house always. And you can always watch her perform, and she took a lot of comfort in that. I think it's interesting, kind of the ways that after a big loss, people feel better and stay connected with those who have gone in ways like this. I think can be very helpful.
I remember hearing a story of two women, very, very dear friends, and they both were diagnosed with breast cancer, like around the same time. And the first woman passed away, and the second woman, who was still living, had a dream. She was visited by the first woman in a dream, and what the first woman said to her is, like, they both really struggle with being mothers of young children and battling cancer. And so the woman who passed away said in the dream to the woman who is still living, like, don't worry about your children. Like, there's so much more we can do for them on this side. Really beautiful. Like this idea, we still get to be involved and connected even when we are in
to give meaning to that.
different form.
I want to talk about your book in a second.
That's a fun segue, death to sex. How are you gonna do that, Dr. Burchett?
There's nothing I can't do. This is my show.
Let's see it.
Transition anyway.
Make it happen.
You won't even know that it happened. It's so seamless.
So seamless. Not
Thank
even
you for
nary a bump.
Thank you for pointing that out to our audience. Otherwise, just would have been along for the ride. I was thinking about my mother donated her body to science too.
She did.
I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to know anything about it. I was like, good, learn from it. And so to listen to you kind of take meaning in and meet someone, I really liked, I liked that. I liked the connectedness to it. I remember my gross anatomy and just having not forgetting that these are people with families and a sense of gratitude that somebody said, hey, I want my body, I want you to learn.
Yeah.
I'm totally donating this to science, when I'm done. But I think in life and in medicine, there's it's easy to forget, to lose the soul and the spirit and the connected meaning to what you're doing, treat people as numbers and cases and whatever, and forget. And just your story of him and how you connected to her, I think kind of brings to life, I don't know, I think it adds a richness to the whole, I really liked that. I liked that whole story. So thank you for sharing that moment.
I tried really hard to think of something else, but
I think that's a great moment.
That was really clear that was what I wanted to talk to you about.
Then that's the one that's the one that you should have brought. Oh, well, look at this.
What's
It's
that
a
doing
book.
here?
We're going to talk about it. Did you like that as a segue?
That's
How
good.
about
It was not bad.
Is it in the right thing? So you wrote a book taking sexy back. Do you need a moment? Do you want to pause? We good?
I'm good.
Okay. So let's talk about your book, because this is kind of the reason for the season. You're on a book tour. Now, the first thing that I want to ask is, we wrote The Purple Guy first.
Yep.
And I'm curious, this is your first book, kind of like this. So what inspired you to write this one? And then how did you come to sex as topic number 2?
Great. So the first one was, I think that I was at a point in my life where I was really ready for a new challenge. So I have been working as a professor and a therapist for many, many, many years. And always along the way, I have really enjoyed working with media, like doing public speaking, working with journalists on stories, doing TV and radio. I really like translating what clinicians do in their offices, what researchers do in their labs, translating it to the general public. That's always been a part of my work that I have enjoyed.
It's such a thing too. You do a really great job of that in these books.
Thank
and that's
you.
not easy. It's a different hat.
Thank
it's
you.
a whole skill itself.
It's a skill I really have enjoyed. I feel really grateful that I have been able to kind of hone it over the years. And one of the ways I do it is this undergraduate class I teach called Marriage 101 that I've been involved with since I was a graduate student. When we start teaching it in a few weeks, it will be our 20th year teaching it.
You've taught Marriage 101. Can I take that online? I'm not married yet, but it's only a Northwestern class.
It is, but there's...
She's like, bro, you need remedial Marriage 101. You're not ready for Marriage 101
But come to
yet?
Chicago, sit in on a lecture.
I might take you up on that,
Yeah,
actually.
absolutely, you should. Yeah, we oftentimes have somebody's mom is in town, so she comes and sits in, or a journalist comes and sits in. So we've got
Be fun.
an open door policy. And I do a lot of online work and courses, and I think at some point there will be actually we're doing a one-day Marriage 101 conference this coming fall for the first time ever, and that's for the public. So
Part of the crowd's excited. Where's that going to be?
that's going to be on campus at Northwestern
At Northwestern
University.
in Chicago.
Yep, on campus, September 12th. Really excited about it. So anyway, so that was the place from where the book was born, was wanting to just kind of like deepen into that translation work. And I knew, I was curious about the book writing process and took that journey. It was a really big learning curve to learn about the publishing industry and all of that. And it was...
What did you learn about that whole
Oh my gosh.
thing?
Well, you know what? One of the things I learned was a brand new appreciation for my graduate students who hand in papers for me to grade, and also for people who are dating, who are putting themselves out there, and that, like, I realized how kind of safe I was with things that I knew, I kind of knew could predict the outcome. This is like you write a proposal and you send it to an agent and you're like, do you want to work with me? You send it to a publishing company. Do you want to hire me? And like dealing with rejection and feedback, it just was, that part was the amount of vulnerability I felt in exposing my writing, myself, my platform, putting that up for review. Ooh, that was
Challenging.
That was challenging.
Yeah.
So I think it connected me more deeply to risk taking in general, to the vulnerability of putting yourself out there, putting your writing out there.
And I think for you, it's worked out.
It has worked out. Yeah, the first book was really warmly received.
Yeah.
And my publishing company came back to me and they were like, so what do you want to write next? And I was like, no, I'm good. I wrote a book.
Oh, they liked you. They wanted more of you.
It's like asking a brand new mama, when she's going to have her next baby. She's like, no.
How quickly did they say?
Right away, like within a few months.
Oh, wow.
And it was interesting because I knew, but I didn't want to know. Like I knew what I wanted to write about more. Like I knew as I was writing Loving Bravely that I had a lot more to say about sex because
What was this one about that you couldn't write more about sex in it? Tell them a little bit about this.
So Loving Bravely, So Loving Bravely is basically, as you were saying in the beginning, it's an introduction to the idea of relational self-awareness. When we fall in love, it is very easy to focus on our partner. They aren't X enough. They're too Y. It's really easy to get focused on how the other person is making the relationship challenging. It's much harder to be brave enough to look at what's it like to be with me right now? How am I coming across? Like, how am I showing up in this space? So the book is basically a journey into self. It's helping you, the reader, understand your relationship to relationships. All the baggage that we all bring into relationship. Yeah. It's not that it's good or bad or right or wrong to bring baggage. We bring baggage in, as you were saying before. It's just the question is, what's the degree to which we're willing to be humble enough to look at it, understand it, and from that process of looking and understanding, now we've got some new moves. Possibly we can stay present for longer. We can be less reactive. So so Loving Bravely is kind of a big introduction to how do we understand and think about the patterns, the wounds that we bring into intimate partnership.
Yeah.
And then sex is an arena.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, sex just becomes another arena where all of that plays out with the volume up to 100 because there's a nakedness, right? There's like a physical and
Literal
emotional
and,
nakedness.
Wow. I just wanted to emphasize, as you're talking about
Yeah.
Loving Bravely, relational self-awareness. That was your thing, that theme in this book, being conscious of what's going on with you in relationships.
Yeah.
And what I liked a lot about it was I never felt blame, shame, any of that. It was this is part of it. This is a normal part of being in a relationship. I think that was like the biggest thing that I never felt like you betrayed that. And that was really helpful.
That's great.
So I didn't mean to
Yeah.
interject that.
No, that's great. That's helpful.
Okay, so it makes sense so you write that book and then you're like, gosh, I liked your word arena, like the playing field where a lot of this stuff is just dialed up is sex.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So I had that awareness, and then the other thing that happened is, we were heading into the sort of late summer and fall of 2017, where of course on, mid-October 2017, Alyssa Milano sends out a tweet with the hashtag #MeToo.
Oh.
And it was an explosion. There were sort of these currents. Alyssa Milano did not create the hashtag #MeToo. Tarana Burke created that many years ago in her work as a civil rights, workers' rights activist. But it was like between Harvey Weinstein and a number of things, number of strands were coming together. Like the Trump presidency, these sort of things are coming together, the climate. And then that hashtag ignites an entire cultural moment where we are starting to entertain the idea of survivors telling their stories, of dropping the shame that is inevitably bound up in the experience of trauma and stepping forward, right? Telling our stories is one of the most powerful ways that we transform shame. If I can share my story and I can still look at you looking at me, I cannot be lost in shame, right? That is so healing.
You said that before. I want you to emphasize it again. Something about connection and shame. You can't have them both at this. You can't remain connected if you're in shame.
Yep. If I'm in shame, I feel like my story is untellable. I feel like I am unlovable, and I can't let you reach me. I can't let you reach me because I can't hold myself in warm enough regard to let you in. And so that's the nature. I think the cultural messages around sexual assault are such that we really look at how to blame the person who's been assaulted for what she wore, the situation she put herself in. So there's that big macro, and then there is the kind of really internal feeling of trauma and shame just really being interconnected and creating silence and isolation. And so what that hashtag does is sort of, it counters the shameful aloneness.
Yeah.
And so where I wanted to be able to put my voice was around, okay, so if we're going to start to crack this, I want to have, like, what's possible now? Like, what's possible as we start to shed this, like, pairing of sex and gender and power and violence? Like, what do we want? Like, how do we hold on to both the pain and the possibilities for pleasure and healing, right? Because sex is also an arena where some of the most powerful healing can happen, not just the most horrific pain, but also it can be an arena of just such profound healing.
Wow.
So basically I feel like
it's exciting.
Yeah.
Like when you were asking the question, like, what's possible? I'm thinking like, make the world a better place. What is possible? How can we take the next step and make this better for people?
And it was where I feel like I chose to write Loving Bravely. I feel like Taking Sexy Back chose to be written by me. I feel like it just came through me, and it was really different. It was a very different writing experience.
And a lot of that inspiration, you said, came from this Me Too time. And is that when you sat down to write it, or were you in the middle of the process?
No, it really was. I think I was starting to play with some ideas. I have a way that I've developed to talk about sex, like in my teaching, in my classroom. So for years, I've been basically teaching about sexuality in a particular way, and I've been getting feedback from students that it's really helpful, that it's a way of talking about sex that starts to break down the pairing of sex and shame, sex and risk, sex and disease, right? We have those pairings tend to be really deep for a lot of us, that sex is about, especially those of us who kind of came of age in like the 80s and 90s, like in the AIDS crisis, like this idea of like, you can die from sex. Like that was our like kind of first
Well, I remember in your
conditioning.
book, you're saying like, what do we talk about a lot with sex ed is like, don't get pregnant, don't get a disease.
Right.
And you don't even start out with the, hey, this can be an incredibly rich experience and with another person, all these other beautiful, wonderful things that's possible with physical and sexual intimacy. And I felt bad when I read that, because I was like, oh my God, I'm a doctor, and like, where am I comfortable talking about this stuff? It's like, wear your condom, and are you on birth control? And those are important.
Absolutely.
Those are essential.
Absolutely.
But when that's like the beginning or the dominating message, we're really leaving a lot to be desired.
And what we leave out, what remains in silence carries weight, right? What remains silent has meaning. So when we don't talk about pleasure, when we don't talk about joy, like that's meaningful. That we've left those to be in silence. Like
Meaningful.
Why?
You mean, why is this the case?
Why?
And
Yeah. Why are we leaving that out?
why are we leaving that out? Is that a rhetorical question? Can I ask you that question?
I think we leave it out of sex ed because I think we don't trust young people to know that sex is pleasurable and then not have. I think we fear
They're gonna go wild and be.
Yeah.
Teenage pregnancies are gonna be even worse.
But actually, the data shows that when, like, when we look at like Northern Europe, like the Scandinavian countries, where sex ed starts at like age 5, there's a museum there where you can go. It's a museum for preteens and teens, where you can go and look into this jar, and it looks like semen, and you can make puppets French kiss each other, and
The semen jar.
and it's just like in there through that lens, it's like of course young people should know that sex is a part of being human, and they trust young people to make choices, like that you can know this and you can be not ready for it. And they actually, young people in those countries become sexually active later. They have lower rates of teen pregnancy, they have lower rates of abortion, and they have lower rates of STIs. So all of their health outcomes are way, way better than our health outcomes.
You're suggesting kind of a more mature relationship to sex.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Moving beyond this idea of abstinence-only education, purity culture, these things that do not set people up to make careful choices.
Up against some big institutions,
Some big
some big
dogs.
cultural things. Yeah, fighting that battle.
Yeah, and I would like families to really authorize themselves to have these conversations with their young people, because if we wait I'm all for trying to change school systems and federal funding and things like that, but that's like turning a massive ship, you know? So I like that more and more there are resources that are really quite sex positive resources that are for families to have different kinds of conversations.
I'm glad you brought that term up. Sex positive. Hang on, what?
We're 53 minutes.
Okay. So I've heard this, you just brought this up, sex positive. I've heard this term a lot. What does that mean? What does sex positive mean?
It's a term that was created to highlight the fact that our world is pretty sex negative, right? We send a lot of messages out about sex being dirty and, what we were saying before, sinful. So sex positivity is a movement to kind of push back against that and to really highlight sexual health and joy and pleasure and inclusivity, right? I read a statistic that less than 5% of LGBTQ plus teens have health education curricula that show positive representations of LGBT sexualities. Less than 5%.
Don't have that example of just how sex can be positive for us, for them.
Yep.
Sex positive.
So sex positive just me. It says nothing about, you can be sex positive and not sexually active. You can be sex positive and really enjoy very sort of like quote unquote vanilla sex. You know, sex positive doesn't mean that you're into kink or you're polyamorous or you're consensually non-monogamous. It just means that you are committed to noticing where you have shame around sex, and you're committed to noticing that and working with it and kind of transforming it within yourself, within the conversations that you have. That's how I view that term.
You know, we talked for just a second about how kind of a knee-jerk reaction against that is the fear of unwanted pregnancy, the fear of, you know, disease. I feel like those are kind of the two things that it's like, well, if everybody's having sex and loving all the time, this is going to go, you know, crazy. But so we talked about that. What about relationships, casual sex, sex only at marriage, this kind of morality component, I think is part of what sex positive is pushing back up against. How do you reconcile those?
Right. There is, I mean, I do think one of the big cultural shifts is that we don't shame people about, you know, what we would traditionally call like premarital sex, right? So sex outside of the context of a marriage has become much more like normalized than it was when our parents were growing up, certainly. I think what happens then is we still get kind of wrapped up in shoulds. Like I'll go to an event and somebody will say like, somebody will ask me like, is it okay to have sex on the first date, or is it okay to have sex on the third date? And I'm like, how the hell do I know? Like this is where like the sexual self-awareness piece comes in, is like, it is for each of us to determine, to understand. So what we're doing in Taking Sexy Back is it's like couples therapy for the relationship between the reader and the sexual self, right? This idea that my sexuality lives inside of me. It's an ongoing, evolving aspect of me as a person. And my work is to understand that part of me. What does she need? What questions does she have? What is she curious about? And that it's evolving and changing as I change. So nobody else could ever tell me the conditions in which I should or shouldn't be having sex, but I can ask myself, what is it? What do I need in place in order to cultivate a really rich, uplifting, healing experience for myself? And that's very different. Like that's pretty radical in a world where the way we usually talk about sex is do this and don't do this. It's really radical to be like, actually, no, your sexuality lives inside of you, and you have to figure out what are the conditions in which it really makes sense to be sexual and connected, and what are the conditions in which it doesn't work for you.
So like instead of an institutional or a societal you shouldn't have sex until marriage, this is right and wrong. You're saying you take a more kind of personal, individualized sense and say, well, what does it mean to you, and what's important to you, and when you are ready and you feel a certain appropriateness or whatever with a person, and that's kind of like saying that's rebelling against this thing. Almost, you said, kind of a radical assertion of no, what I want matters. Yeah.
Which is so, I mean, this, as you say that, it makes me think about sort of gender role socialization, like how much from the time that we are little, some people live beyond a gender binary now, but nearly everybody had a chapter in their life where they were raised as a boy or as a girl, and messages were heaped onto them about who they should be vis-a-vis sex based on their gender. So the institution is sometimes, right, a religious institution that's saying no sex till marriage, but sometimes the institutions are the media or pornography or these influences that are sort of, that tell us what we should want.
Outside messages.
Yeah. So what we're doing in this book is moving towards a more inside-out experience of sexuality.
An inside-out experience. So, you know, as you're moving from an inside out, I think one of the challenging things is when you have a clear rule on the outside, don't have sex till marriage, and then you don't listen to those anymore and you kind of turn in, it can be a little like untethering, you're buoyed, and then it's like, am I creating all this myself? Like, what is it then grounded on? You know, like how do you answer these questions? If not with the clear rules of this is how Dad did it. This is what the church says. Da, 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 da. That's what I'm sure about.
Right.
Now it's like, how do I make these decisions now?
It's so true. It is like the ground is kind of shaky under your feet. I think it is developing practices of knowing what yes feels like inside your body and knowing what no feels like inside your body.
Connecting to your body for those answers.
And giving, like, honoring that. And I think what happens when people come, like, I think it's really easy to get focused on, like, well, I feel like I should because I think you want to. Like, it's really easy to get focused. I think especially for those who've been socialized as women, we can get really into, like, I should because I can tell that you want to, versus how might I know if I really want to? And that whole thing about we don't normalize for girls that you actually have a sexuality and you have desire, and you may say I'm not ready, but that doesn't mean that your body may really, really want to, even though you're going to say no, I'm not ready. You can have sexual desire, you can feel like you really want to, and you can still be like, but I know what I know about myself is it's better for me to take it slowly. And and I think for those who've been socialized in the masculine, there can be a sense of like overriding what the body is saying because of that heavy pressure that as a man, I should always want to. And so a man may override his sense of like, actually, I don't really feel quite safe here. I don't know that I trust you. I don't know that it's really going to be.
What is overriding? So the body is saying, like, let's take the man for example. Maybe the body's saying, I don't think I feel safe. I don't think I want. The body's like, maybe we don't want to have sex right now. But the head's like, yo, I'm a man. I want it. I should want it. I'm going to do it. Is this like the mind? What's the disconnect?
Yeah, I think the disconnect is the mind. The mind saying.
The mind running this social programming where the body is giving a different message. And that message might be, hey, this doesn't feel right right now. So you're saying listen to your body. Don't run this script or this socialized program, which may not be right for you. Your body has more wisdom than this thing.
And sometimes we don't know. So in the book, I introduced a term called an FGO, like a fucking growth opportunity.
I saw that.
Because sometimes we don't know until we know. Like sometimes we need the data of overriding the body's felt wisdom to be like, oh, that's what I did there.
Give me an example.
Well, in this case, if we're going to say with this example of a man who is a little bit of him knows that he's not ready to be sexual, but he overrides it with this script of it's going to be embarrassing if I don't go for it, or I should go for it, or what's she going to think if I don't pursue? If we use a heterosexual example, what's she going to think of me if I don't pursue?
Right.
So he overrides it, has sex, and then afterwards feels like just kind of like a heavy, just like sense of just sadness or
regret
or
guilt,
shame.
Or just like maybe I betrayed myself a little bit or something.
That then, rather than beating himself up for it, it's an FGO. Okay, so then you can kind of like look at what was the point at which I self-abandoned. Do you remember that? Where was the moment where I overrode what my body was feeling? So you can kind of do like a post-mortem, right? And sort of like look back and see where was it that I exited my own truth.
You're gonna learn from it.
Yeah, and then you learn from it.
Yeah.
It's such an opportunity for deepening into self-awareness if we let it be that, rather than the risk of feeling that post-regret or sadness and then just feeling ashamed of ourselves. Well, no, don't get lost in shame. Just use it as a learning.
I see you pacing.
I'm not pacing. I'm just going to let you know you're in an hour. You guys are doing great. Keep going if you want.
I want to keep going for a little bit.
You got 10 minutes till 1, so.
Are you good, doctor? Okay, you like my segues. We did talk a little bit about religion and spirituality. Talked a little bit about self-education or sex education. I'm just reading down my thing. Grief and sexual desire, and then the cheating one. Remember when you were starting to talk about that earlier?
Oh.
I thought those were interesting too.
Okay. Let's do that.
we talked a lot about grief in this, and off camera we were talking for a moment about someone who you worked with who had a connection between sexual desire and grief. Tell me that story again. I thought that was interesting.
I got an email recently from a journalist who writes for Cosmo magazine. And she was like, I want to do a story. Well, she said, when my grandma passed away, I realized in the days following her death, I was really horny. And I was very embarrassed about it. And so I just kind of buried it. And then my other grandma passed away, and it happened again. And so now I want to write a story about why grief makes me horny. And my reaction was like, oh my God, thank God somebody is finally asking me this question. I was really ready to unpack the intersection of sexual desire and grief because I think it's fascinating. And I can't pull a research study for why it happens, but it was really interesting to kind of explore avenues about why it might.
Why does that happen? It makes me think of that terrible scene in Old School, in Wedding Crashers.
Oh, that's
where
right.
They went, but that's that scene.
He goes to funerals.
Instead of trying to pick up women at weddings where everybody's happy, Will Ferrell goes, he's like, oh, I've been going to funerals, they're the best. And he's got two women on his arms like this, they're so vulnerable. Right. But it's so wrong and clearly kind of this satire thing of it. But so what is the connection between?
Well, I think one thing is that the erotic energy thrives on transgression. Like it thrives on sort of, we shouldn't, this is wrong, sort of obstacle tends to spike desire. I think it's why there's oftentimes so much sexual passion in infidelity, in cheating relationships, because woven into the entire existence of the relationship is we really shouldn't. Like you want to spike someone's desire and be like, we really shouldn't.
It's kind of hot to do something wrong.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's a piece of it is like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. And then, the erotic is like, what now? We shouldn't? Okay. You just boom, you just lay down the card.
Naughty.
Right. So I think that's
you
a
want to be
piece
naughty.
of it. I think some of it is craving comfort. So I think this gal I was talking to was talking about she's deeply in love with her intimate partner. And I think it's a way for them to connect sexually during this time. It's a deep way for her to feel his comfort, right? It's one thing for him to pat her on the knee and be like, there, it's okay, you lost your grandma. It's a different thing for them to be naked and holding each other and for her to really feel into the comfort of that.
Feel physically consoled.
Yeah.
You're needy, emotionally needy.
Yep. But it does confront some sort of story about I am grieving, and when I'm grieving, these things are okay and these things are not okay.
Interesting. I think I can understand that. Mm-hmm. Tell me about, you were also talking about cheating. Right. And you were saying, I know I'm going to get to whatever. I was like, say that one again.
So very often a couple comes to me for therapy in the wake of somebody having cheated in the marriage. And so we need to, it's an interesting work because there's a piece of it that's crisis care, right? There is people who are in the throes of discovery or disclosure of an affair. They have, very often the person who's been cheated on has sky-high levels of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
From
symptoms.
the event.
Yeah, they aren't sleeping, they aren't eating. I mean, it is a horrific thing to go through those early days and weeks of disclosure.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what we're doing is sort of like the sort of emergency room care, of just making sure everybody is safe and working on. Yeah. And but then we're also kind of unpacking the story. And what used to surprise me, and now it's happened so many times that it doesn't surprise me anymore, is that in learning the story of the affair, inevitably, as we're kind of rewinding and looking at sort of the fault lines, how this marriage was vulnerable, inevitably what we find is that the person who cheated was either in the wake of a significant loss, like losing somebody they loved, a job loss, or they went through a health crisis, like a risk of their own health being being
threatened.
That very often that creates the conditions in which the affair happens.
Interesting.
So it's like
why wouldn't they turn to their partner? what are they getting outside that is, I don't know, medicating or what? Why?
Right. I think it may be in part, it may be medicating. So to have people who are involved in infidelity, it's such a high, like cortisol, like the sort of like neurophysiology of cheating. It's incredibly, because there's so much strategy, there's so much deceit, there's so much kind of like making plans, figuring out how are we going to get away with it. It's very like neurophysiologically kind of compulsive.
Interesting.
And so I think that can numb.
Like feel very
pain.
alive.
You can feel so very alive. So that maybe is the antidote to the death, the loss, the risk that I'm going to die, right? That sort of, if the threat was I just had a health scare, a cancer scare or whatever, I'm going to claim my aliveness. And so sometimes that is what the affair does. It's like a way of claiming a sense of aliveness.
But you said you've like seen this so many times that you start searching for that. You're like,
I just am not surprised when, I mean, I try to not like, I try to believe what I see rather than see what I believe, but it just is, it's not at all surprising when I'm like, right, and then your mom died, and that, it just sort of.
Like, oh, wow. Fascinating. People are fascinating.
People are, I'm sure you feel the same way, I'm never bored at my job.
In the ER, it never ends every day. I'm like, you did what? You did what? A dog bit off your finger? What? You were doing what?
That happened.
I think we have to end.
Good, okay.
This was good. What do you mean? You're done?
No, this was good.
Do we have any questions from the crowd before we finish up? From our live non-studio audience?
Mine was the question just
The
talked
culture.
about dealing with loss earlier.
Yeah.
Cultural.
You've heard, it's a really good movie. It's called The Farewell
Yeah.
by Awkwafina. She's
I'll check it out.
Chinese immigrant. Her family's from China, and her grandmother gets a terminal cancer diagnosis, but the whole family can't tell the grandmother, and she has to like fly back, and they have this fake wedding to celebrate her life.
Oh.
And they all are like going through these motions of like grieving her passing away, but she doesn't even know.
Yeah.
And so it's like there's comedy and drama and all that kind of wrapped up in that. But
What was it called again?
The Farewell.
The Farewell.
Check it out.
But that is a practice in China and in Asian culture in general, where they think it's a negative, like has a negative response on the body when you find out you have gotten a terminal diagnosis, which like facilitates you dying faster. And the weird thing at the end of this movie, I don't want to spoil it, but
don't spoil it.
Okay.
I'm going to watch it. Don't spoil it.
It's very good.
Brendan,
I never knew that about it.
Brendan, did you have any questions for the doctor?
Actually, you guys touched on a lot of really cool things, and there's a lot of good food for thought there. I feel like if you didn't even answer a question necessarily talking about one topic, you kind of hit on it in another area that kind of helps you process it both ways. So I thought this was awesome.
Where can people buy this, Dr. Solomon?
That book is available wherever books are sold. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, your local indie bookseller.
Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon. And they can find you where?
My website, dralexandrasolomon.com. I'm also active on social media, on Facebook and on the Instagram.
The Gram.
The Gram.
Go find her there. Check it out. And check out the book that I gave more than any other book last year, Loving Bravely. This was a thrill for me to have you. This was so good.
Nice.
I appreciated the conversation. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Now, you actually have a little experience with this, but our guest closes the show. So look right at that camera, say whatever farewell thing you want, and sign us off.
Okay. This is Dr. Alexandra Solomon. I've had a wonderful time here on Dr. Larry Burchett's show, and have a wonderful day. Love bravely and take your sexy right back. Bye-bye.
Yeah, that's a perfect sign out. Thank you for watching. Take a screenshot, share it on some social media. Dr. Larry Burchett on Instagram. I will reply. Please subscribe to the show on iTunes. Check out the YouTube channel. We will see you next time. So I know you because I saw you on a TV show.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Did you know? Do you remember that? It's been a while.
Do I remember?